So just to give a little bit of background so I understand what I'm doing and why. It was many months ago that I started this project called JS Wiki. I mean, it's 9 years ago. That's it's a lot of years. So the point was that I felt that it's very difficult to find good JavaScript libraries because you go npm JS, and then the search wasn't as good as it's today. So you want to find animation library, then it gives you animation library, but then you have to spend a lot of time figuring out which one to use. So I started doing this catalog, and then a couple of Ukrainian guys came to me and they were saying that we're making this catalog as well, so maybe just combine forces, and then we did this web-based one. It's really crappy, but it sort of works. I mean, it's the same categories. It has a lot of broken links or whatever. If you did this right, it would have value. I think the only thing of great value is the mailing list. So every month I send people a lot of links. There's like 1,000 subscribers or something. I don't know how they find the list because it's difficult to get to the list, but yeah, whatever. So we did this site. And then a couple of years back, maybe 4 or 5 years back, I started writing. So I started writing books, and then I did this site. And because I for whatever reason, a tool that didn't exist for React that will let me generate a site, because Gatsby didn't really exist yet. Started about the same time as my project Antwar, and it's not even my project. There was this Swedish guy that wrote a generator that I liked, and he was doing something right, but it was also missing something. So I rewrote the whole thing a couple of times. I added the feature called interactive rendering. So you could say that you have a piece of React code here that has interaction. So it has a button, and when you click the button, then it has to do something here, or it has a table of contents or whatever, where you want a limited amount of interaction. The point is that you don't want to do single page app, you still want a static site, but with this little bundle here. And what I did this double bundling process. So I first do generate the static pages, and then I extract the interactive pieces, and then push it through Preact, and then I have little interactive runtime. But as you can imagine, it's not the fastest, but it's not the slowest, but it's something I want to get rid of. So then a while back, I started thinking that maybe I could take this side and that side, combine them into one side. I want one side, because I want to kick this domain out. I just want that it redirects to mine. And I want that the catalog is here and everything is nice and so. So then I was thinking that now it's the time. Now it's the time to do a design system, and there are tooling around this problem. So then I started writing what I called the Tailwind web explorer, because at the end of last year, I found this. There was this tool called Tailwind. It's for styling, CSS, and the background is that there was this client. They wanted a new site, and they came to me and they were like, we have layouts and we want you to code the layouts, but you can use everything you can, everything else with React. So I was forced to write this site with HTML and JavaScript and CSS. And I was like, I don't want to write CSS anymore. So can I use Tailwind? And they were like, yeah, you can use Tailwind. And then I was writing Tailwind, and then I figured that it's not that bad. It's actually a great idea to use utility classes because it's very close to Team UI. So we have this sort of mapping between Team UI and Tailwind. Only problem was that when you write vanilla JavaScript, it gets really boring to write the logic. So then it was maybe January or so, I was thinking that maybe I can push the state into HTML, because if I had this thing, I could do state, because what I normally have, I have logic like tabs, like this basic thing. And what I found out is that it's actually a great idea to have the state in HTML. So far I have styling, I have state, but I was missing third piece of what third piece I need. And then for whatever reason, I discovered the third package. It's called typed HTML. So let's hope it loads. So what's typed HTML? It's a package nobody knows. is so hipster that nobody knows this, but it's also super cool because what they do, they transform from JSX to a string, and you know what that means. It means I can take this idea, and then I can put it inside the function, and use my state management solution, and I can use Tailwind, and I have quite powerful approach for writing components like in React without using React, and that was exactly what I wanted and needed. So that was sort of the background of why I started writing this starter.
All right, well, we definitely need a time out here at this point, and we need to talk about some of these technologies, because I pride myself as being relatively up to date, but we are now so bleeding edge that my eyes are bleeding a little bit. So let's get from the starting. So is this a static side generation approach, or is this a server side rendering approach? Is this a client side single page application?
It's a static side generator, and to make things worse, I refactored everything. So a lot of this stack you see here doesn't exist anymore. But that's sort of maybe I should show you what I have right now. So I started from Tailwind Webpack Starter, and what happened after a while, I kicked out Tailwind, I kicked out Webpack, so I don't have Tailwind anymore. I use Tailwind through Oceanwind, and I use, instead of Webpack, I can even show you what I did with Webpack. It's quite horrible in the end. I mean, you could not write this without having some experience. So I have 300 lines of Webpack configuration, and it even has some bugs in it. So there were some issues I could not fix. And then what happened next, I found this cool thing called Deno. So they published 1.0 around May, and I was always curious. I mean, it's like Node. You see Node, and it has this, Ryan Dahl wrote this, so it must be good. So I was like, now it's time to try this, because I want to get rid of Webpack. So I was like, let's do it with Deno. So I will show you the current version that sort of works. So I'm going to start the server. So now all I have in the place is development server. It's enough to prove that this thing makes sense. There's still some things to implement. It's not a complete solution. It's not something I can use in production yet, but it's starting to get there. So
okay. So I think, did I get this right? So you're building essentially a static site generator, but instead of using the Node JavaScript runtime, you're using the Deno TypeScript runtime, which Correct. Doesn't really have like a package JSON, or doesn't really use like traditional package management, but you're still somehow using these traditional JavaScript packages like Oceanwind and typed HTML as Deno dependencies.
Yeah, I mean so I started using Deno like 3 weeks ago, and it's a really weird process, because what's going to happen is that, I mean, I started with package JSON, and then what happens is that you start removing dependencies. Like, I don't need Prettier anymore because Deno has Prettier. I don't need Chess anymore. Deno has something for testing. I don't need this and that. So in the end, you reduce the package JSON, and then one day you just kick it out. So I don't have package JSON in the project anymore, and I'm using their approach. So I mean, they point to resources through URLs. So that's one of the things. You kick out npm. So you're like removing a lot of things, and then you're like, aha, I can use URLs, and it's like, then it makes sense. The weird thing is that first you feel like, why do I do this? It doesn't make any sense. And then it's like, why do I do the npm wipe? Because that doesn't make sense. So it's like this transition from npm model to this, and I'm still like undergoing through this. Like, I'm becoming a Deno programmer step by step, but I'm starting to appreciate what it offers. So it's really it's mind-blowing stuff.
And so this Deno land place where you download these packages from, is this like a CDN that's mirroring npm, or is it its own package registry that's completely different source of truth?
So it's its own registry. So when it comes to like consuming Deno, there are a couple of these. So you have Deno land, and there was this other place I forgot. And then, I mean, there's one more option, is that you can do something little. I don't know if it's nasty, but I mean, because you still have npm, and npm has 1 million packages, and then you have let's say unpackaged. So you have these CDNs, and that host what npm has. So they're CDN or to mirroring npm. So you can go here and you can like get any package. Yeah. So now I have the package, and if you get a little bit lucky, you can consume this code from Deno. So you can essentially use the registries or some third-party registries. You're not like bound to one registry. You can consume from different sources, and as a fallback, you can use this npm mirror, or as a fallback of a fallback, you can do some lib directory where you put the JavaScript and then you hack around, like with Prism. I mean, this code will not work with Deno unless you do a little wrapper for it. So it's you have different options on how to consume. So it's quite more complex than in npm, but at the same time, I sort of see the value of this approach.
So let's talk about the value of that approach for like static site generation in particular. What do you get from Deno in this case that, like that makes all of this additional sort of like learning and complexity worthwhile over just using bog standard Node?
I mean, that's it's a very good question. So because I'm still like discovering the values of value what I get, but it's TypeScript out of the box, and these days I think a lot of people agree that this will develop with TypeScript out of the box. So you have something that's somehow modern, and it has very good utilities. So you don't. I mean, that's the code, about 100 lines of code that's replacing my Webpack configuration more or less. It needs a little bit more to be complete, but it's actually I know the perfect example. So here, I think I have the server running right now, and what will happen with my old solution based on Webpack is that I will compile my own whole static site before I can develop the site. So it will have to go through every single route in the system and make a bundle, and after that I can connect. But in this approach, it's doing something different. So let's go. I have too many tabs. Let's go here. So I have the thing running here. So let's see. So I have here. I go to the blog. You see, it connects again, but the point is that it's doing this work. I mean that's working on purpose, but because it doesn't work, that doesn't work yet. But it's you see, it's doing this work on demand. So it's not doing lots of compilation before. I mean, it's doing some type checking at the moment. I could get rid of that, but it's generating a page on demand in development. And you see the implication is that when I have a site that has thousands of pages, and I don't have to do this pre-compilation, you can see that I'm saving a lot of time. So it's like that alone is one of the biggest wins I get. I mean, of course, I could do the same approach with Node. I mean, there is not saying that I cannot do the same with Node, but it's that's where it went with Deno.
So basically, you have no bundler running during the development. You don't have a Webpack or anything like that. So what kind of web server do you have running here? Does it have a web server, or is Deno somehow supporting this out of the box?
So what we see here is the server itself, and I'm using maybe you know Koa. So there is this framework called Koa, and then someone went and wrote a framework called Oak. It's a little abstraction over what Deno is doing, and it's somehow similar as Koa, but I have this tiny, let's say, application app, and then this is here I capture any request, and then I map from request to some HTML response. So here's my server. That's it doesn't take so much code to write some server logic.
Yeah, this is very cool. So I totally see as a nerd, as a as somebody who enjoys just like poking into new technology, I definitely see the draw of this. What about on the kind of like on the consumer side? Like if you imagine, pursuing this path down its sort of logical conclusion, what do you think that, this stack that you've built here, how can this be better than, what our existing sort of setups are for doing whatever this is? Is it static site generation? Is it design
It's going
system?
to
Is
be
it a bit of both?
it's going to be static set generation, but I mean I think what I want to provide as well is some kind of a good set of components to start with. So because normally you just have like, I mean of course you could say that it's simple to extract the static site part out of this, but I think there's value having both. So from I think if I do my work right, and if I implement features like incremental compilation for big amounts of data, because if you consider my use case, I have thousands of pages. Let's say I have 10,000 pages, and I change some content somewhere. I still not have to recompile everything. So maybe I add incremental compilation. So what I want is to provide some kind of good performance out of the box. And one of the ways how I want to provide that is that I'm working with a new bundler called SWC. It's written in Rust, like Deno, and it's really very, very fast. So now I'm like playing with it a little bit. So the Deno integration with SWC is not perfect, but I think it will improve in the coming months. But I mean that's a big win alone, because so for some features like here for design system for just to get this code here, I have to do some parsing. I have to go and find the right function in the code. I have to extract the code. The same is for prop type extraction. So I have to do some AST operations to get data. So I think SWC it's really it's a great tool for doing it.
Oh man, this reminds me of like the early days of React 5-6 years ago, when you somebody would be working on something, hey, it's cool, it's going to be it's going to question a lot of sort of like existing ways that you've thought about building software, and you kind of like have to do this like personal calculus of like how much effort you're willing to you're yourself put into like digging into these new things versus like just letting other people figure it out for you. So I guess, is that your motivation here, is like you wanna do the digging so other people don't have to?
Yeah, I think it's going to that direction, because I mean literally today, I mean I found a bug in SWC, and then I went to SWC Slack, and I was just saying that I noticed this behavior, and then 1 hour later there's a fix. So it's like you're trying new things, you're finding things that don't work, and then get them fixed. It's like with maybe we discussed this Oceanwind a little bit before we finish. But with
actually, I wanted to ask you about that. But before we do, just a quick reminder that if you do have questions for Juho, you can drop them into the RF 2020 miniconf Q&A channel on the React Finland Slack. But yeah, so I definitely wanted to talk more about the design system part of it, since it's definitely the theme of our event today. So Oceanwind, typed HTML. Let me see if I got this right. So typed HTML is essentially a JSX syntax that gives you TypeScript type checking over HTML, make sure that you're passing the right things in the right places. And then it just generates HTML on the back of it. So it's not a full React runtime. It's just the JSX syntax. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's mapping. I can even show the code. I think I have it somewhere here. I had to fix it somehow, but it's let's see. So that's the type definition. I think the type definition can be improved. So I have some quite strict typing. Then I describe events. This could be better as well. And then that's the interesting file. That's the file that's replacing React create element. So it's actually taking JSX, and you see a lot of code, but in essence, what it's doing, it's mapping from JSX to strings. That's all it's doing. it's doing this. Just you like think that JSX is a template, and that's it. It's sort of super simple idea. And once I saw this package, I was like, that's exactly what I need. Because what I want when I write my code, let's give some little example. Let's see, maybe we go to this blog. I mean, okay, that's using block index layout. So I have design system, layout, block index. So here you see I use my primitives, and then let's say I was working with this system. So now that's what I want. So I want when I make a mistake, I want a type error. So that's exactly what I get. And I have a very strict system that's forcing me to do these things. So I cannot like go and forget to put size, because it's going to force me to put the size there. And there like things like you see the typing works so well that that's margin X, that's like X margin. So I cannot put anything that's invalid in the system here. So I wrote quite strict typings. So that's sort of things you can build on top of that. So when you design components, you can make this interface very, very strict. So it's difficult to break.
And is that style interface then where the Oceanwind kind of library comes in?
Okay, yeah, okay. So let me explain about Oceanwind a little bit. So I hope you get this point of Tailwind, that in Tailwind, you have these utility classes. Each utility class, it maps to some CSS. And from my point of view, the problem is that with Tailwind, you have to purge, they call it purge CSS. So there's this little tool, purge CSS. Because the way Tailwind works is that you have this very big CSS file that's all the rules, and then you're picking up rules from that, and then you use purge CSS to get only the rules you want, or only the rules you're using in the code base. And that's something that's quite brittle, because if you have a class name that's dynamic, that's somehow you're producing it with code, it's going to break with this tool quite easily. And then one day I got somehow lucky, because I found this new project called Oceanwind. And I was like, a couple of days, I was just looking at it and thinking, is it just the thing I need and want or not? And then it happens to be the thing, because it's in this demonstration, and in the next React Finland event, you will get the author to explain better. But in this demonstration, you see we're mapping from Tailwind classes to actual code in runtime, and it's what he did is super smart. So let's see if I can find the file. So he implemented the grammar of Tailwind like this. So there's a longer story which you will learn more about, but it's there's a grammar that's mapping from a class name to classes. So they don't have this problem we have in Tailwind. And the way I integrate to Oceanwind is quite simple in the end. So in the design system, I have this what I call box. So that's the basic primitive of the system. I mean, it's a lot of code, and it will take a lot of explanation to understand what it's doing and how it works. But here I have what I call O for Oceanwind. And in one place in the system, I'm mapping from a class name that I give to class name that's in Oceanwind. So that's doing the mapping, and it's doing the important part on this component side. And the other part of the problem is that, I mean, how do we know that, or how do we get the CSS? How do we get the CSS from those? So it's using something called Ocean, OTION underneath, and it provides what we call get style injector. So we instantiate this one. So now we have injector, And then we do something here. So now Oceanwind is running. I mean, we call the styles in different ways. And this thing here is going to capture all the calls. So this thing knows we did margin 4, we did padding 2, we did different things. And this thing knows everything we did during this process of rendering the HTML. And then we get the style tag, and that gives us the CSS we need. That's how, I mean, it looks, it's not that many steps. It's like this integrate on the component level and capture, and then put it to HTML or separate CSS. That's how Oceanwind integrates to this kind of system.
And so it has some kind of like client side runtime, right? Like it's not a server side only tooling.
No, yes and no. I mean, in my system, what I get is static CSS, static HTML, no runtime. But I mean, the funny thing is that he started from runtime, so he wrote this as a runtime, so he could put Oceanwind to browser. But my problem was that I wanted to use this on the server side. So you know what happens next? Then I spend some time, let's do server side rendering, because Ocean it supports server side rendering. So all I had to do was to expose some things, and that's how we got server side rendering to Oceanwind. But I think Luke will tell more about this. But in my solution, you get very powerful styling approach without the cost of having a runtime, and it's really quite cool.
That is very cool and true testament to open source. So we only have 1 minute left on the time slot. Then we're going to do a Q&A. We can dig a bit deeper into this during the Q&A, as we don't have that many questions on Slack yet. But I'd like to kind of conclude our official presentation portion here. What is this project? It's called Tailspin. Is it available somewhere? Can people use it?
Sure. You can find it. It's Survive.js Tailspin. I mean, because of reasons, I had to show it too early. So it's not complete. It's not something I will use for anything. It's more like exploration. And for me, it's exciting because I get to learn a lot about, I mean, I didn't know Oceanwind. I didn't know Deno like a month ago. So I learned these new things I didn't even know exist, or I knew Deno exists, but I mean, I didn't know how to use it or what's the point. But now I really see the point. So it's sort of like, if you want to hack around this, I'm of course happy to hack with you, but it's more like personal exploration at the moment.
So would you recommend, if somebody got inspired by everything that you're doing here, what would you recommend as a path for them? Would it be to look at these underlying libraries that you're using and contributing to those, or would it be to go make your own experiments, or like where is this in your mind right now?
I mean, you can of course get in touch with me and we can do something together, or you can look. I mean, it depends on your stack. If you have a stack and you want to use Oceanwind, it looks like it's quite simple to integrate. So, I mean, this integration part, it's a little rough on the edges, but it's really cool. And maybe look into Deno, like start with Deno. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Well, we're at time. We're going to do a Q&A now. So anybody who has questions for Juho about his projects, please do head over to the React Finland Slack. And there's the channel RF 2020 MiniConf Q&A. We have one question here, which is that does the, you're using the typed HTML as a JSX kind of translator, but could you use those same components as like client-side React components seamlessly, so that you can make this into a kind of a universal React app, or is there something dependency-wise that prevents that from working?
So that's a good question, because that's something I've been thinking about, because I have sort of cool approach, and then I have these projects that use React. So it would be nice if I could, instead of rewriting everything to my approach, that I could take my components to use in this React project, like this React Finland side. I think it would be cool to use my components and start replacing one by one, and then go with this disciplined approach. And then one day I drop React from this, but actually this doesn't even have React runtime, so it doesn't have a big issue. But to get back to the question, I started thinking about it, and I found out that like the main blocker, it has to do with children, because here for whatever reason, I think it's just a design call. They made one. I'm not sure if it's a mistake, but the point is that I have to find the right spot.
We're currently no longer sharing your screen. We're in the Q&A layout now. So
yeah, sure. So I forgot that you're not sharing my screen. But the point was that typed HTML it handles children in a different way. Mm-hmm. So in React you have children in the props, but in typed HTML children is provided as a second parameter, and the point is that it's not compatible with React. So for that reason, what I had to do, I had to change the behavior so it aligns with React, so that the children are inside the first parameter as children field. Because after that, we have something that should work with React. So if you consider my components, then you should be more or less able to say that this I have this elements import that it's coming from React. So I should be able to swap between React and typed HTML, and it should work if I do it exactly right. So I see no problem why not to do that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be, I wouldn't say that it's like, the minimum requirement for a static site generator these days, but like, if you are working in the kind of React-ish land, then like there's a lot of cheap wins to be made by just being able to hydrate a component on the client side. Otherwise, we're back into the old progressive enhancement land where, like you might have all the type checking that you want on the server side, but on the client side, you're getting absolutely none. You're just modifying DOM trees.
Yeah, I mean, my approach is similar and different to React. So it's similar in terms of how you write components, but it's different in terms of how you hydrate. So I think you could maybe take my components and then use them, consume them on the React side. But I think other way around will be harder. It has mainly to do with state management. Because in my case, state management is something that's glued on top, that's living in HTML, and it's relying on a tiny runtime. But in React, you really need React and a lot of baggage to handle state. So there's enough overlap for it to be comfortable, but there is enough overlap for it to be like not like super simple.
Yeah, I had a question about this earlier, which was you have these libraries. You have Tailwind, which then inspired Oceanwind, and I can kind of like see the continuum there. But then you use Sidewind for state management, and I can understand that somehow it's related because you're describing things within the HTML syntax. But like, is there like, what is this movement of all of a sudden moving all of this kind of like both presentational and state logic into HTML? Is this something that you feel is sort of happening in React space, or is this a move away from the React model, or like where is this kind of whole concept coming from?
It's a good question. I mean, there is this very popular library called Alpine. It has like 10,000 stars. So nobody knows Sidewind because I more or less wrote it for myself and for my use cases. But I think the idea is valid, and it has mainly to do with the fact that still a lot of people are doing like server-side rendering. And it's still kind of cool if you could do server-side rendering while providing like simple state in the templates. So you write templates, and you don't write JavaScript, just write the logic into the template itself. And that's sort of I don't know if it's a step ahead, but it seems like some kind of like what's really visible at the moment is that now people are thinking that, because if I give another example, it's like with this with styling. So what Tailwind showed us is that it's okay to use utility classes, put them to HTML. So then the next step is that you start thinking that, wait a minute, this makes sense. So maybe you could make the same for state. And then you do that, and now you notice that HTML itself is able to encapsulate component behavior if you're squinting a little bit. But it's that's sort of the thinking behind this. That HTML can do maybe a little bit more than we think.
Yeah, I mean, like the immediate reaction that I have to that is, well, wasn't the whole point of like moving all of this stuff into JavaScript that we get the the Turing compatibility and all the tooling advantages of the JavaScript ecosystem, instead of having to stringly type things and like make sure that this bit of string in HTML matches this bit of string in JavaScript, matches this bit of string in CSS. But I guess the type system here is essentially bringing some of that benefit, like making maybe the problem all along wasn't the ability for us to define arbitrary code logic. Maybe the problem all along was to just make sure that we had statically analyzable constructs that made sure that like our software was robust. Is that kind of what the gist of this is?
Yeah, so I think it's always like this. So you start to develop a new solution, and you always start from like, if you consider React, like 5 years ago, the assumptions they made about the web were likely correct and made sense at the time. But now, if they started doing React from today, they would have totally different starting point and assumptions and knowledge. So I think it tends to go like that we get experience, we get better tools. And these days, the big differentiator is like a TypeScript. So instead of writing everything in JavaScript, now we write everything in TypeScript. And now Deno is coming, so maybe Deno will change things again a little bit. So maybe instead of having a lot of tools around JavaScript and TypeScript, we have less tools. We have like Deno, and we don't need a lot of tools. Maybe we get less tools, and then it's really like interesting to see where we're going with the web. So I feel there's a very big change potentially coming in the next years as we start rethinking front end again. So it's exciting times.
So I mean, like in product land, we often think of it in terms of sort of like bundling and unbundling. Is like there's a time for different projects, smaller individual tools to go and do one thing well in order to discover the best thing to do it. And as we kind of stabilize into a solution, then we can just like bundle all of these things together into like a single sort of stack that has better developer experience and less sort of compatibility issues in between it. So is this it? Are we going through the bundler less bundling of the web ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean that's the big irony, because I wrote a very thick book about Webpack, and then the first thing I do in my project, I kick Webpack out. So it's like
well, to be honest, as a developer, that is the dream. Thank you, Juho, for this presentation. I think it's been super interesting. I've definitely want to work more with Deno and Oceanwind after this. So thanks so much for sharing. We're gonna hop back on the public stream, and then we're going to be starting our next session. Thank you, Juho.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Bye.